And welcome to the 28 Minutes of Sanity podcast. This is JJ. Paul is here today. Paul, how are you doing?
I'm pretty good. How about yourself?
I'm doing okay. I'm coming off the DL. We are in this weird season where we've actually released a couple podcasts. I've actually created a schedule for these things, but we're still not recording them in the exact sequence that we're putting them out. But feels like we're kind of in a rhythm now. I kind of have a sense of what we're doing. But I know that you have been dealing with some illness. I'm just actually coming off the disabled list myself, so people might be able to hear it in my voice. But dealing with some of the junk that's going around, and thankfully I think our family survived the worst of it. But Paul, good to have you here. Thankful to those of you who are watching or who are listening. Just want to let you know a couple of things. You can follow us on Twitter at 28min of sanity. I'd like for you to give us a follow on Twitter just so we can get our count up, and that can help us get the word out about what we're doing. You can send us a note, 28minutesofsanity at gmail.com. And so now that we've got a couple episodes out, really would appreciate your feedback, even your constructive criticism. Just let us know what you think about the program, about what we're doing. We welcome you, whether you agree, disagree with the Christian worldview, welcome your participation. I do just want to say again that I appreciate you've had a chance to see a couple of interviews. Our friends Ben Blowers and Dave Badalek. I really appreciate them taking time to join us for what we're doing. And we've got some more pretty cool interviews coming up. Some we've recorded already, some we're scheduled to record, and that gets me excited about what we're doing. So I'm excited about those things.
I do have something for the comment section.
Go.
Do we need to put the Christmas tree back behind JJ? So comment below.
Okay. All right.
How do we need that background? Christmas tree or no Christmas tree?
Yeah. We might even do a Twitter poll on that one because it feels like that could get controversial. Some people love their Christmas year round. Some people are like, why in February would there be a Christmas tree? But let us know what you think. So yeah, we'll be talking about that more, I'm sure. Connected to a little bit to our guests and to the class and to what we're doing, there's a couple of real life things that I want you to know about. And again, given the weird nature of when we record these podcasts, some of this might be past tense when you're hearing about it, but as we record, these are both future events. The first one, Ben Blowers has been promoting in Lincoln. He is bringing in a couple of guest speakers, February 4th and 5th to First Street Bible Church in Lincoln. And I think there's also a live stream of this. And so I think you can sign up and watch it online if you can't get to Lincoln those days. That's sure understandable. But Ben is bringing in Doris, Hansen, and Carrie, Bradshaw. The title of their event is Escaping Polygamy. And I know that if you turn on cable news, or not cable news, but polygamy has kind of been portrayed lately the last couple of years as just an alternative lifestyle. And I had the privilege of meeting Doris several years ago out in Utah, and our mission team got to meet with Doris and get to know her. She actually grew up in a polygamist community and escaped before she was, married into polygamy, and has come to faith in Christ, and is kind of letting people know, let the rest of the world know what's going on in some of these Mormon fundamentalist communities. And Paul, I would just tell you that if I hadn't seen some of the stuff up close and talked to people who have lived this, I would say there is no way this stuff is happening in America today, but it is. And there are things that the body of Christ can do to help people who are involved in this world, people who need the truth of Christ and are deeply affected by this practice, which is not of God, which is not biblical. So I really invite you to check out this present. If you can go, great. If you can live stream it, great. If you want to talk about it in class or talk to us about it, you sure can. But that's coming up.
What's it cost? Anything?
I did not prep great. I do not see a cost on this announcement. Like I said, if you want to I'm not seeing anything about a cost, so I'm not sure if there is one. But for more info, if you do your own Google search or your web search engine of choice, if you do Escaping Polygamy, Ratio Christi College Prep, Lincoln, Nebraska, the names that you would put in are Doris Hansen, Hanson, or Carrie Bradshaw, not from the Sex and the City show, I don't think. Kari, and then Bradshaw, like the quarterback or the little town in Nebraska. It's at First Street Bible Church, 100 West F Street in Lincoln. So that's how you can track that down, or just get in touch with me, and I can connect you with Ben on that.
And we could try to put a link in the description too.
Oh, yeah.
So check that out, and if I can find something, we'll put it in there.
Mm-hmm. Okay. The following weekend, February 11, a little bit different kind of a thing, is a debate. And this debate is actually in Houston, Texas. So I suspect most of our listeners won't be making the trek, but it's a debate between two Christians who I actually appreciate a lot. James White out of Arizona has Alpha Omega Ministries and has done a lot of great apologetics work. And he comes from what you described as a Calvinist position. And Tim Stratton, who many of our people have gotten to know, Tim is a Holdridge/Kearney native, and he's a proponent of Molinism, which takes a slightly different approach to reconciling God's sovereignty and man's freedom. And James and Tim are going to be having an intramural debate at First Lutheran Church in Houston, but that one's going to be live streamed, I think. And so just want to let you know about that. Friday, February 11, if you're free, I think it would be worth your time to take a look at that. It says here it starts at 7 p.m. Central. And it shows an Eventbrite fee. So I don't know if you may have to pay a little bit, but I think it would be worth it if it's something, diving in some pretty deep waters in a really complex kind of issue. But just wanted to call your attention to that, partly because I think go ahead.
I was going to say this sounds stupid, but in case you're listening to this later, it's the year 2022. So if you're listening to it next year, it doesn't count.
Right. Okay. Yeah, we're in 2022. So thanks for clearing that up. Hopefully we're around that long that people are going to be like, what year is this? And
yeah.
So
yeah, we will.
Yeah. Good call, Paul. Thanks. So 2 things coming up. Hope you check them out. Today, Paul, we are talking about the problem of evil. And in a minute, will kind of define what that is. But the reason that we're talking about this, for our class, I put together a survey, because I want to be in the class. I want to be talking about what our class wants to talk about. And so I listed off 25 topics and asked people to rank what they want to talk about. And one of the highest ranking responses on that survey was people want to talk about common challenges to Christianity. And in my experience, the problem of evil is probably the number one challenge to the claims of Christianity. All that goes into it, that there is a good God who has a plan. Kind of touches on that White Stratton event that we just mentioned, but how can evil exist in a world that, in a situation or worldview where we say God is good? And so that's what we're going to be diving into a little bit today, and there's about 15 different angles that we can approach it from, and just wanted to take a run at a few of those angles today. But I thought we'd kick it off. We could frame it a little bit. We're in a season where there's no shortage of examples to illustrate what we're talking about. On the outline I gave you, Paul, I put COVID at the very top. You have...
Are you trying to get us banned right away?
I am, just by I don't think I'm going to say anything too controversial. Well, I guess let's find out, shall we? Let's just run through this.
I think the usual stipulation is you got to say something like contact your doctor. We're not professionals.
Okay. I am,
even if we're not talking about it.
I am definitely not a professional at much of anything. So since you said that, Paul, we should be ban free. We should be good to go.
Yeah, we're good.
If not, you're watching this on Rumble like a year later. So, but COVID is obviously very real. I suppose there's people out there who don't think that it is. It touched my family. I mean, it touched the world nearly 2 years ago, according to when we're recording, when the whole world shut down upon reports of COVID starting to show up here in America, affected everyone in some form or fashion. About a year ago, almost exactly a year ago right now, it touched my family. My wife got very sick, spent 8 days at the med center in Lincoln, and time of tons of stress and anxiety and uncertainty for me and for Carol and for our family. What about you? What's been your experience with COVID as a disease affecting you, Paul, and your family?
It is pretty good. We actually had the original version. Pretty much the whole family had it, and that hit us pretty hard. Which, coincidentally, I was the worst.
Okay,
but I have permanently scarred lungs. I can't talk. From when I was younger, I used to be a smoker, and I got bronchitis so bad I popped blood vessels in my eyes and messed up my lungs. It was fun, but so yeah, I was pretty bad.
When you say fun, you've got the finger quotes going, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. All right.
I'm a little bit too much like you when it comes to I'm very sarcastic. So anything I say just
we're both going to work on that. We're both going to work on that.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. For the most part, it was bad. Like I don't know how much detail you want me to get into.
You go into as much as you want, and if it's too much, I'll have you edit it out.
We don't do edits.
Okay. All right. Then just tell your story, man. Tell us what happened.
No. The original one was pretty bad, and it was to the point where I literally felt like I was going to die. I was positive, which I'm not positive of a whole lot, and I was just waiting for God to take me because it hurt so bad, I couldn't breathe, and I think it was for a long time too, like a week or two straight. And my kids and wife, they got it, but they weren't too bad. My wife was probably second, and then the kids didn't have much symptoms at all. But then I survived. And then I got this new variant this year, and it was bad also, but nothing like the original. Like it was a lot nicer. It was more like a bad strep throat. It wasn't like on deathbed or anything.
Right. And that roughly describes what I feel like I just went through last week. It jumped on me last Thursday or so, or early in the morning, woke up with a sore throat. And then it just kind of hung around for 3 or 4 days. It wasn't fun by any means, but wasn't horrific like a lot of people have been through with it.
I think I had to take antibiotics because I think got strep throat from it or some sort of infection like usual.
Yeah. So that's our personal health histories here. And we're just talking about this because we think so many of you can relate to what it's like to have this disease. And I've been on the phone with people this week who have had it to varying degrees. I know that we have lost people in our community because of the effects of COVID.
That's what I was going to say too. We know a lot of people. We know some people that are really great people that have passed away from it.
Yeah.
So it's pretty serious stuff. It's nothing to mess around with.
Right. It's absolutely real, and it's forced us in our community and around the world to, in many ways, to confront things like mortality. Confront, what does it mean to know that your life's in danger, that the economy is in danger? So much has gone along with it, and I have no intention to dive into some of the political and some of those other components of it today, except to say that it's caused us to talk about things that we haven't typically been forced to talk about as a culture. We have here in the West have been so privileged in so many ways, so much wealth, so much access to good health care, so much comfort. Again, not perfect by any means, but relative to the rest of the world and relative to the rest of history, we have lived with remarkable wealth and comfort, such that we haven't had to think about some of the harsher aspects of reality as a culture for so long. And COVID has brought so much to our doorstep that really has been at bay for the average person for decades now. and has caused us to really think about things in a different way, which brings up what I want to dive into is what is commonly known as the problem of evil. And so I want to set this out as philosophers do in a real specific way, so that we have something to talk about and think about. And it goes like this. It's a syllogism, and it goes like this: if God is all good, he would prevent evil. And if God is all powerful, he could prevent evil. But evil exists. There are definitive things in the world that we can call evil. And because those things exist, because they are, the God does not exist, or at least the God of the Bible does not exist. A God who is omnibenevolent, who is all good, and a God who is omnipotent, all powerful. That God must not exist because of the existence of evil. That is the problem of evil in a nutshell. And that's how it's been put to Christians or to theistic thinkers throughout history, ever since this idea has been formulated. And in my judgment, that is one of the greatest challenges to Christianity. So in our class, mentioned we want to talk about this. This is probably the A1 that people deal with. Before I say too much more, Paul, when I showed you this topic, what kind of popped in your head? Where did your mind go, just as a topic in general?
I think just that we're spoiled. Like you said earlier, there's so much that we have taken granted for in the U.S. in general, but even worldwide, where we just have everything handed to us, and we're so convenient. Where now to the point where even though internet wasn't around that long ago, if we were to say lose our cell phone and not have internet, there's people that would literally probably have severe mental issues and not be able to handle it. So I don't know. We get spoiled, and then it's hard to say.
Have you seen any of Jerry Seinfeld's Netflix specials?
I don't think I have.
Okay. He's got one where he points out that your own personal energy is connected to the battery life left in your iPhone. And they'll say if you see 4% on your iPhone, you feel exhausted physically. And if you find it's a pretty funny.
That actually makes sense because I think I'm that way.
Well, yeah.
I never thought about it, but it does make sense. That's why I always got to charge my phone.
It's so easy to talk about, people are so dependent on technology. And I'm like, I better look in the mirror because I know how dependent on technology I am. But yeah, check out the Seinfeld bit if you get a chance. It's pretty funny.
That is pretty good. Yeah, and then people used to, back in the day, before even any technology, they had to go hunt for their own food, raise their own crops, work hard all day, every day, 7 days a week. Multiple family members die of disease or fire or whatever injury, just all the time. It was nonstop hard. And yeah, we just have it so easy right now. It's just we don't know what God has planned.
Right. And I think what I hear you getting at is something that I put in the notes here, that the problem of evil, as we've just defined it, is a pretty new phenomenon. You didn't hear people talk much about we weren't around to, but it's become more of a challenge to Christianity as the world has gotten more comfortable. And you would think it would be the opposite. You would think, man, as we begin to conquer some of these sources of misery, as we extend lifespans, and in so many ways over the last few hundred years, poverty has been in decline and hunger has been in decline. And you would think, oh my goodness, so therefore the problem of evil would become less of a challenge to Christianity. But that really hasn't been the case. When you look at philosophical circles, the more comfortable we are, the more ready we are to say, God, you owe us an explanation for the pain that's in the world. And so there's this weird paradox or phenomenon where the better things get, the more ready we are to put God on trial for the fact that things are not perfect. Is that what I hear you saying?
Yeah, I think so. That sounds pretty much sums it up. It's kind of like a good friend of the family pointed out one time. maybe this is a different topic, but it just popped in my head, where if, like playing piano, if she didn't learn to play the piano and go through all that heartache, she wouldn't be free to play it as she does now and enjoy it. So we don't know what, heartache and other points of life God's going to put us through so we can enjoy life and not just be spoiled like we are now.
Right.
Like that's what made me think of it, was being spoiled, was we have to actually have some hard times. Otherwise we're not going to feel it. It's just going to be blah.
Yeah. The Switchfoot song, "The Shadow Proves the Sunshine," can come up here. And, we just got a little bit of time here to talk about this. There are like a million angles we could come at this from, and we're simply not going to cover them all today. And so that's, again, where I would invite you to email us, 28minutesofsanity@gmail.com. If you're part of our personal community, call us, text us, because we want to be talking about these things. But one of the responses to this is, I put down at the bottom, number 7 on the outline, could God redeem evil? Now, I can come up with instances where we could say evil could be redeemed. Like one, this is just a mental illustration, but I think it proves the point. Like, Paul, if I asked you, how would you like to have a paper cut? Would you say yes or no to that?
I'd say absolutely not.
Okay. But what if I said, Paul, I'm going to give you a paper cut, but then tomorrow I'm going to give you $1 million. How do you feel about your paper cut now?
I'm probably going to take the paper cut.
Did you say probably?
Yes. Okay. Not probably. I would take the paper cut.
You take the paper cut, right?
Yeah.
And so those things like aren't necessarily connected, but think about the number of situations where somebody could say the phrase, the pain was worth it. We can come up with situations like that, right? I try to go to the fitness center and work out a couple times a week, do some squats, some bench, and it's uncomfortable. But every time I do it, beforehand, I remind myself, I'm going to be glad I did this. I'm going to be thankful for the strength and flexibility I get out of this. And then after the fact, I'm always happy that I did it. But it's not fun. It's not exactly what I want. But I can come up with an illustration like that where pain is redemptive. And we can easily imagine certain kinds of pain being redemptive. How many of your kids do musical instrument?
All of them.
All four of them?
Yep.
And the act of practicing your scales or whatever is kind of mundane, kind of boring, right?
Yep.
And in and of itself, it's not what you would choose to do. It's uncomfortable. It's not directly rewarding. But then you just talked about developing the ability to play the piano or play a musical instrument is worth it. And we can see all sorts of instances where pain can be redeemed and where we can grasp it. And one of the answers to the problem of evil, and one of the most biblical answers, and in class this weekend, I plan to get into really some of the specifics of this, is if we can see that in some instances, evil or pain can be redeemed, then we can trust that there may be other instances where pain is redeemed, even if we don't understand it at the time. We can easily understand the weightlifting example or the musical example, but we also have stories in our lives where pain is redeemed that we could not have imagined it being redeemed at the time. And we could have said at the time, God, you must not be good. God, you must be weak, because I'm going through this and I do not understand why. I've got some stories that I could tell off camera or off mic about that, where I can say I've learned to relate better to the problem of evil because of some of the things I've gone through. And I imagine you have too, right?
Yeah, I have.
So that's just a little nugget of an answer. This podcast is meant to be just kind of a jumping off point for some things. And so we're not pretending here to have the final word on this, but but just making some general observations so that those who are coming to the class have something to think about. Those who want to interact with us, who don't come to the class, have something to send us notes about, questions, even arguments, comments, things like that we'd love to hear from you and interact with on a future podcast.
Yeah, and I think kind of on the topic of pain, something, I don't know if this is the right time or not to bring this up, but for those that don't know, I'm pretty much permanently disabled and have excruciating pain all day, every day. But when I went some counseling over it, one of the books I had read, or the pastor said I could read, what really helped out with that, and I can't remember the name of it. I don't know if you know the name or not, JJ, but it was, she talked about being able to relate with people. And, if you're in an earthquake with somebody in San Francisco and you moved to Nebraska and you say you have like some sort of trauma from that earthquake, and somebody in Nebraska is like, "Oh yeah, that must be scary." They have no idea what you've been through.
Right.
You can't relate to them.
Right.
So it's just having that personal relation.
Mm-hmm.
But something to think about is, God, he's been through some hard stuff, like anything way more than we've been through.
Right.
So we can look to God and have that personal relationship, through our pain, because he's been there with us.
Mm-hmm.
Like he understands it. He's been there. He's done that. He's there with us now.
Mm-hmm.
So we just, hopefully that can help people hurting relate to, I can look to God and not be like somebody that doesn't understand it.
Absolutely. I think you are getting, even though we don't get to the bottom of this answer, I do believe you're getting to the ultimate answer. What you're saying kind of pushes me back up to how we lay out the problem of evil, and the implication when we put it as explicitly as we do. The implication is, therefore, God must be somehow cruel. Somehow God is, he could probably teach me something with a lot less pain than he's putting me through. And therefore, whether intentionally or not, we're putting God on trial. But then, like you said, when we understand the gospel, when we understand the suffering that Jesus went through, who is the creator, who is the author of everything, and for Jesus to voluntarily endure all that, he knows more pain than any of us can fathom. And whether it's your back pain, whether it's family pain, whether it's rejection, whatever it is, Jesus knows it more than you do, and more than I do. And yeah, I can completely relate to what you're talking about. For example, some of the, I'll keep this one vague, but some of the family things that Carol and I have been through, we could not have imagined prior to going through them. And so when you do, and you meet somebody else who's been through that, you have a kind of bond with that person.
Definitely.
And you have the ability to minister to that person in ways that you could not have before. And those are the kinds of connections that I don't know that a philosopher could come up with in his head. But when you experience those things, you realize that God is doing a deeper work than you can put into this kind of a syllogism. And so yeah, that's one of the ways we can come at this is, the fact that pain and suffering produce something in us that couldn't be produced any other way. And there are things that we are thankful for. Paul, one of the other podcasts I listened to, you are quite the handgun enthusiast, and you're trying to teach me your ways, and I'm kind of
a little bit, but
front end of it. So
I'm very particular.
Okay, well, but I'm just one of those other podcasts I listened to. The guy just had a guest on who had been through a horrific experience with cancer, and the host, they weren't talking about handguns at the time, but they were talking about his experience with cancer, and he said that he's incredibly, he does not want to go through that ever again. Like, he's not saying it like, now that I've been through it, I do it again. He doesn't want to go through it again. but he's incredibly thankful for the experience and how his soul grew, and ultimately his trust in God grew as a result of that experience. And so,
yeah, and that's kind of what I'm going through. Like, I'll be honest with you, I'm still struggling. I'm still really bitter about it, and I'm still in a lot of pain, and I know it's not going to go away. But, big picture, I can see it working in my life. Like, I do know that I have a stronger love for God. I have a stronger love for people and strangers, and just a less dependent on little stuff that shouldn't matter. So it kind of basically matured me by quite a few years,
right?
Just mentally of what real life is really about. So that really helps deal with it. But yeah, it's a whole different ball game of how you think.
And when I hear you say mature me, that maturing is another word for that is Christ-likeness, right? Is spiritual growth.
No, I didn't think of it that way. I guess that does kind of make sense.
Mm-hmm.
When I was thinking mature, I was thinking like, as a teenager, you're like, you can't get injured. Life is fun. You just do whatever, you just feel alive, and you just got that different whole mindset.
Right. Yeah. And that's not totally bad, that sense that you have at a young age, but it needs to be tempered, it needs to be humbled, right?
Yeah. Definitely.
And ultimately, whether we're thinking about Jesus at the moment we say those terms or not, they really are synonymous. The act of being humbled is, when it's working the way it's meant to, the act of becoming more like Christ. The act of maturing means we're growing up into what we are created for. If we can learn to recognize that language is ultimately biblical, it can actually help us see the connection between our experiences and the things God has made us for. And so all of this is baked into the experience of this discussion. And so, like I said, this is just a jumping off point for what we want to do in class. There are, I made a list of kind of all the angles that we could come at this from. I've got a whole separate page, Paul, that I thought, I'm not sure how this is going to go, but
you're holding that on me. You got more than I got. That's not cool.
I have this fear of, okay, we've committed to 28 minutes, and are we going to give people 28 minutes? Well, I've only got 7 points here. What if we get 10 minutes in and we don't have anything to talk about? And so I always have a backup plan, a little bit like when George Costanza's asking the girl out, and he's got a script just in case he doesn't know what to talk about. And there's one early episode, he's like, I threw away my script. The conversation was going so good. Like, that's how I feel about this stuff. So I've got my little security blanket here, but looks like we don't need it because we had plenty to talk about today.
Oh yeah, I'm here for you.
So we're going to wind it up here, just because this was meant to, even though it's a hard thing to talk about, meant to whet the appetite. But just to find a way to kind of tie this all together from the standpoint of this podcast, Lewis, there's never not an occasion to quote C.S. Lewis. So as we sign off here, let me read what Lewis wrote on suffering. We've kind of touched on this a little bit from our own stories, but this quote is going to tie it together here for us. Lewis wrote this: does God want us to suffer? What if the answer to that question is yes? You see, I don't think that God particularly wants us to be happy. I think he wants us to love and be loved. He wants us to grow up. You see, we are like children who think that our toys bring us all the happiness there is, and that our nursery is the whole wide world. But something has to drive us out into the world of others, and that thing is suffering. Put simply, pain is God's megaphone to rouse a deaf world. We are like blocks of stone from which the sculptor carves a form. The blows of his chisel, which hurt us so much, are what make us perfect. And that quote just always helps me picture what evil in the world is capable of doing as far as bringing about our growth and ultimately God's glory. So I just wanted to close on that.
That's a pretty awesome quote.
Yeah.
And I don't even remember the context, but does it have anything to do with like Mater Dents from the movie Cars? Is that related to that?
No, but oh man, I'm just blanking on what are you talking about?
Well, I think Steve McQueen was complaining about the tow truck driver's dents in his truck, and he's like, but he loves them because they're something about his past.
Oh, okay.
He's calling them mater dents.
I vaguely remember that, and yeah, it's actually not Steve McQueen; it's Lightning McQueen.
Oh,
two
you're right.
very different.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's all right.
I have no memory.
You were half right, but to top a C.S. Lewis quote with a Larry the Cable Guy quote is that's what we want this podcast to be about.
No, I think C.S. Lewis topped that. I was just throwing in something.
I don't know.
To show how much better he is.
I got some Larry the Cable Guy stories for you, maybe off air, but no, that's exactly it. I mean, we could keep going here, but think about it is no fun to get a scar. I've got a scar right here from when I was in the 4th grade, and at the time I'm like, the world is over. I can catch me off air sometime, and I'll tell you what happened. But now I'm like, the scars are pretty cool. They're part of who we are and part of what God has made us. And that scar taught me not to wrestle my brother next to the fireplace right before the Super Bowl starts. I learned an important lesson that day, and I haven't done it again. So that scar taught me just a little something about how to be more mature. And ultimately,
so you had pain, and it matured you to not do that again.
It did, yes. Now, I will say that my mom said that we'd be back from the ER before the Super Bowl started, and I missed the first quarter. So it also taught me that my parents are not always right, but I think I've forgiven them. So if they're listening to this, Mom, Dad, I love you. I forgive you for making me miss the first quarter of the Super Bowl. So
no, you're still bitter to this day.
A little bit.
And I'd just like to add, maybe I'm speaking out of turn here, but there's a lot of stuff we didn't talk about just because we're out of time.
Right.
But I do know everything we're talking about, at least what it sounds like, is it's all kind of intermingled. Mm-hmm. So really pay attention to, or not pay attention, but come to the next episodes, because we are going to be talking about things that intermingle with this topic. So it kind of all goes together. So you'll get a lot more information later.
When I've given apologetics talks before, I've said that every apologetics question is just a version of this question. You can always bring it back to, this is the real question that we're all kind of trying to wrestle through. So yeah, appreciate your participation. We do need to get out of here. Follow us on Twitter at 28MIN of Sanity. Send us a question, a comment, criticism, a note of encouragement, 28minutesofsanity@gmail.com. Paul, we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Take care.